Hello, World Singers. My name is Tyler.
My name is Brooke.
And this is Cosmere Conversations.
Okay, not gonna lie, I am so excited for this episode.
We are back to finish off Way of Kings in the reread, and it's been great. So many downloads. It has been probably our number one episode, or at least, number one in a week. So everybody is real into Way of Kings. I think it's got a big pull because the rhythm of war is a beating.
As we get closer to the book release, I have definitely noticed an uptick in people joining us on the social media and possibly joining the fandom for the first time. So that's cool and exciting, and welcome to all new fans and new podcast listeners. Thanks for being here.
If you're here for the part 2, know that we do all spoilers all the time. We know this. We covered last week Way of Kings parts 1, 2, and 3. We did the interludes, and now we need to have the epic conclusion to Brandon Sanderson's masterwork and the most important bit of the Cosmere.
At first, when we were talking about how to break up this book for the episodes, we were kind of like, are we sure we really want to only do part 4 and 5 at the end? Like, is that going to be enough? It's freaking enough. Literally everything happens in part 4.
The whole concept of the Sanders Avalanche was just on display here. He takes you on this ride through parts 1 through 3, and then we get to part 4, and it is just all excitement all the time, never ending, and emotions, they crush me.
So many emotions.
Everything is great, everything is awful, everything is great again, everything is awful again. It's all
just crying and crying.
And then you go back to reread what you just read because it was so good. Like, this is it, people. This is the book of books. I am so glad we're here.
I have so many quotes pulled out for this episode, too, because there are just so many amazing things.
We're going to try to at least stick on our basic pattern that we've been following throughout this reread. So I think we just should do a little bit of a intro, maybe, with the interlude to kind of get us back into Way of Kings.
Let's just talk about you want to go first. Interludes first?
Yeah, at least talk about that first interlude to kind of set the tone again.
Yeah.
What was your favorite part of that interlude?
Well, like I said last time, these interludes, literally every time I start one, I'm like, oh man, I love this one. I think about every single one. But for the interludes that we get in Interludes 3, that is going to be Jarenid, who is the older Ardent, and Baxl, and then Szeth as well. And both of those non-Szeth ones I find super interesting. Jarenid is such a cool way to explore the theory of quantum physics in the Cosmere.
Yeah, it definitely is like one of those things of just like, oh my goodness, worlds are colliding here.
It's the best description for me personally. Like, whenever someone else tries to explain quantum theory to me, I just come back to that interlude in my brain and I'm just like, oh yeah, it's just like when Jarenid is measuring the flame spread.
Which is probably me after like one too many glasses of wine. Just
it
like,
is.
Let me tell you about quantum theory.
And I'm like not really listening to you. I'm just thinking about Jarenid and her flame spread.
That's excellent because I also love Jarenid and the concept that it's such a complex topic. As you said, many people try to explain it, don't understand it. Everyone who does understand it a little bit goes, we don't understand anything, a lot of it. And so to have this kind of simple explanation of such a complex phenomenon, but also do it while moving forward our understanding of Spren and the cognitive realm and how it works. And it's just such a great example of moving the plot forward, moving our world building forward, growing the planet of Rashar and like filling it up with real things. And all of a sudden we have this connection to what we're just beginning to discover and they're just beginning to discover.
I can't wait
really
to
cool.
see how this theory and like what Jarenid is discovering comes into play later. Like, I feel like it's definitely going to. There's something about the nature of Spren and the way that they work that is being initially explored here in this interlude that I think is going to be important later. And I'm just really excited to see how this continues to develop.
Okay, so do you want my crackpot theory that I have not had while drinking a glass of wine?
Of course.
Excellent. So it's the rhythm of war, right? It's the rhythm that's created is like when the flame spren is being measured and kind of taking form. We also have the concept of span reads where things are linked and the Parshendi who are linked through the songs that they sing and the rhythms that they beat and feel inside. And we know from Oathbringer down the road that it's a piece of connection in the same way that like the Spren are entangled together. And so I think that the secret that might be unveiled has to do with a kind of like musical note progression in entanglement theory. So like basic entanglement is that you have two options of spin, positive or negative, and if one becomes positive, the other becomes negative. So you could also see that as like note on, note off, like sound on, sound off. And then through
zeros
that,
and ones.
Exactly. Through that, you can create music, which then are the beats that the Parshendi are used to link up. So like they know what to do and they can communicate because they're taking advantage of the same thing that span reads are and the same thing that is connecting the Spren. And they're feeling out and they've kind of created this musical language, but they're feeling out what, words and communication and like things to do and feelings, emotions to have through this kind of entanglement, Spren entanglement.
That's very interesting. My face is saying all of the things.
So hit us up on Reddit, Twitter, or Facebook and tell me how crazy that sounded.
And correct everything that we got wrong about quantum physics.
Yeah, scale of 0 all the way up to crazy.
I also, while we're on the interludes, I want to briefly talk about Baxl's interlude in which we see Shalash smashing stuff. And we get a little bit of insight and description of the old magic as well. So that's what's cool in that interlude.
Exactly. It's just like all this stuff just being sprinkled in.
So many good tidbits.
And we mentioned it last week, the idea of like the master painter coming back and like adding the shading and the fine detailing. And like that's really where, a lot of times like painters would have apprentices do a lot of the kind of base work and get those colors all set right. And then the master comes in and like just finishes it off. Because like that's the skill that takes a really, really long time to learn and understand and to use. And I feel like that's what Brandon's doing here. He's just like, let's just add a little splash over here of Shalash and just another little splash over here of quantum theory.
Just a splash of Shalash.
You're going to really have fun with that all the time. I can't wait till we read Oathbringer and you just get to talk about her like paragraphs after paragraphs. So I feel like we've already had one completely crazy theory. Let's just keep rolling on through right into, well, did you have any rough cuts? Anything that you did not like?
I have no qualms.
I have no qualms either. And it would be silly to even
I'm not
pretend.
even going to try.
Yeah, exactly. Like last week we tried to pretend like we were like, the ending or
really bothers me. The intro was so long.
Yeah. So let's just not pretend. The end of Way of Kings is absolutely incredible. Tell me about your 5 favorite things in no particular order. What are the things that jumped out to you?
I have had such a difficult time choosing only 5 things to talk about, but I want to jump right in to the most exciting thing that I want to say. I'm just going to start off with the best.
Excellent. Hit us with it.
That is Navani. One, I love Navani. I love Navani the way that I love Steris, with just an undying appreciation for her awesomeness. In this, well, okay, let's back all the way up. In our Oathbringer episode, I talked about a theory that Navani might become a Radiant based on a mantra that she says over and over again in Oathbringer, which is that she wants to bring order from chaos, bring order from chaos, bring order from chaos. This is like this mantra that she's using in Oathbringer and I was speculating in that episode, oh, like what?
Sounds like a vow of the
Radiance.
Radiance.
Yeah, it sounds like an ideal. So what possible Radiant could she be? And I think I speculated the one that bonds the Lightspren.
The Will Shapers.
Yes, the Will Shapers. Mainly because I was just kind of grasping for like which one.
Yeah, what could be a possibility?
Haven't we seen yet?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. However, in reading the ending of The Way of Kings, it just hit me like a brick, something I had completely overlooked. A couple quotes. Navani thinks, quote, "This was a pattern. She often saw patterns in things," end quote. And then later, as she is creating her massive Thath justice glyph for Dalinar, quote, "Art was about creation. That was its soul, its essence. Creation and order. You took something disorganized, a splash of ink, an empty page, and you built something from it. Something from nothing. The soul of creation." End quote. Obviously, Navani is going to become a Lightweaver. Obviously.
Joining Shallan.
Yeah, it just could not be more clear. And I absolutely adore that these two people who are potential Lightweavers.
No, you're all in on it.
I'm all in.
Everyone heard that, right? How she said it. She was like, I guess. No, 100%. You are throwing down money on. If there was a gambling market, the Irish teens for Cosmere stuff, you would be betting heavily on Navani as a Lightweaver.
Absolutely. Did you just listen to those quotes?
That's
I
all
have
tit facts.
Yes, I have a primary source.
Excellent.
But I love that these two people, Shallan and Navani, are like seem quite different at first, which is why I didn't put Navani as a Lightweaver, because we have been thinking of Lightweavers as artists, and I find this in our world as well. A lot of times we're really limited in the way that we think about artists, and we think that art is just painting or dance,
kind
or
of defined.
yeah,
very
it's like
narrowly.
a very narrow definition. But when you think about Navani and the way that she is an inventor and an explorer, a creator of Fabrials and Spren, it makes so much sense. Like she is an artist, a creator in that way as well.
Yeah.
And so I love that these two sort of different aspects of quote unquote art, both drawing and sort of scientific technology creation, are both being lumped into this same category.
Navani's like a maker. She's a craftsman. She's a crafter. She's basically.
I think she's more than a crafter.
No, she makes crafts. It's great. Like they're really advanced crafts. That's totally possible.
She's like Steve Jobs. Navani is the Steve Jobs of Rishar, and I will not take that back.
Why? You are going so hard in on all these ideas. Just a lot of people are going to hate on you because Steve Jobs didn't actually build a lot of things. He just had ideas. Exactly. See, this is why you can't go so hard on any one thing.
Okay, well, you get the principle.
I'm leaving
of what
this
I'm
in.
saying.
Exactly. I'm leaving it in just so it's all clear, folks. We are 100% in on
I'm 100% on this theory.
Steve Jobs. I love the idea, though, of someone who really seems very different from the Lightweaver that we've come to know, being in the same order, because it shows a diversity of abilities and opinions, and not just like a one one-size-fits-all type of model. I also think we should probably keep in mind that there are some orders that have a lot of members historically from what we know, and others that seemingly don't have either many
They
members.
have more limited.
Yeah, so if the Lightweavers and the Windrunners and maybe like the Edge Dancers, not the Truth Watchers, but I think the Edge Dancers are probably like the number 2 that we've seen quite often. But like healers, fighters, Lightweavers, they do kind of jump out as the ones that like, oh, maybe there would be more of these because
totally
there are more, cognitive spren that are willing to make that bond. So I just like the idea, and I think it's important to keep in mind that like we may be seeing more and
more heavily weighted towards certain groups than others.
Exactly. Like there might only be one bondsmith in Dalinar, but we might actually see like, oh, there's another Windrunner who's going to be doing the same thing as Caledon, and that Windrunner is going to have a little troop of squires around him as well, and they might come together at some point in the entire story. It's a total possibility, and I'm excited for it. But let's stay real focused on the Way of Kings. Anything else to close about Navani? Are we good?
We are good. Tell me the first thing that you want to talk about.
Excellent. Absolutely one of my favorite parts of this back half of Way of Kings is when Caledon meets Hoid.
I think this is one of your favorite parts of like all Cosmere books.
Well, yeah, probably.
You talk about it a lot.
Because it's fantastic, folks. Like, it's that good. Caledon goes out onto the Shattered Plains. Hoid is out there as Wit playing a flute, and Caledon has this interaction that I feel it's so good. I will not gush too much about it, but I will just say that what Brandon is able to do in this moment is give you a incredibly deep, on like 7 different levels, example of storytelling presented by a storyteller.
The master storyteller himself.
Yeah, and it's like Hoid's a master storyteller, but then Hoid is a creation of Brandon, who's a master storyteller, and it goes like another level. It's just great. Could you hit me with a quote? Because this is really one of the first also examples of like, oh shit, this isn't Wit. We know at this point now he's called Hoid. We know that this is a big moment. So like when he starts talking, we're like, we need to pay attention.
I love that we pulled out all of the same exact quotes from this portion. Quote, I began life as a thought, a concept, words on a page. That was another thing I stole. Myself. Another time I was named for a rock.
A pretty one, I hope.
A beautiful one. And one that became completely worthless for my wearing it. End quote.
We have this concept of a Hoid that goes back a very long time and is, far above, and we don't know, is he a shard? Is he something like Ruin or Laris? Is he something unknown, something bigger than what we have seen in any of the other Cosmere books at this point? We are really just like blown away a little bit by the information that Hoid starts dropping. So in terms of Cosmere moments, I really do think this is like a key one. Like if in the movie, in the TV show, when this happens, people are going to be like, what? That's when you get the Nick Fury coming out at the end of Iron Man, just be like, what? You thought you were the only one? It's like, oh, we're connected now. All the worlds are connected. Everything's coming together. That, to me, feels like the importance of this moment. And we also have information given about Hoid's backstory, about where he comes from. So let's do this quote real quick. Quote, I've come to your land to chase an old acquaintance, but I end up spending most of my time hiding from him instead. End quote.
Yeah, I pulled that quote out as well. I think it's so interesting, and I don't really know like what to think about it. I'm not convinced that he's talking about odium or Rasa here.
I think we're meant to think he's talking about odium.
Right.
And I think he could be talking about cultivation.
Oh. No, cultivation is a woman.
He does use the male
Yeah.
at the end with him. Okay.
Maybe
Totally
one
fair.
of the heralds?
That's as good a guess as any. Although we do think that the heralds, while very old, are still from Rashar.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean he couldn't be an old acquaintance.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, when I hear anything about Hoyd's old life, I go back immediately to
The
the shattering.
beginning.
Yes. And thinking so that's why I was like,
okay.
odium, cultivation.
Even if we're not going all the way back to the beginning, a herald as an acquaintance would have been, like we said last time, 4,500 years ago. If that's not an old acquaintance, I don't know what is.
Well, hopefully they won't be forgot. But clearly what is most important from this passage is the story of the Wandersail, the voyager who takes off, arrives on an island or land where the people seem to be ruled by this like tyrant figure who resides up in the castle, and they are using a form of, brutal justice on one another's.
Well, they're incredibly peaceful and also incredibly proficient, right? So when the crew of this ship first gets there, they're like, wow, what just a fantastic place. Everyone is just so nice and polite and kind to each other, and everyone who is performing a job is performing that job just like wonderfully and effortlessly.
Yeah.
And then one day, like, the illusion starts to crack and they see the brutality that comes out from underneath that, which seems like such a weird dichotomy, that they start to wonder about, like, why is this otherwise totally peaceful and cool society having these moments of absolute horrible brutality?
And it all comes back to this feeling of there is the leader above who has given us these rules, and we have to follow the rules because the leader is a very harsh person. And when they go to explore that, they find, of course, that the leader in his castle is dead and has been dead for a really long time. And he comes back down to the people and tells them of their leader's demise. Hey, guys, you can just be nice to each other. You don't actually have to do any of the brutal stuff anymore. No super severe punishments for dropping a crate or anything like that. And immediately the society completely dissolves. There's kind of mass chaos as the people all start to turn on each other. The rationale that is given to the sailors is that, don't you understand, if there is no leader up above who is like holding this punishment for us, if we didn't do exactly what he wanted, then we are responsible. And we are the ones who chose to be so evil to our neighbors, and it's all on us now. And they can't take that, and it breaks them and breaks their society. And that's the story of the Wandersail, kids. It's just, not the happiest of tales, but of course, this is the tale of the Knights Radiant. This is the tale of Szeth, Sun Villano.
Definitely the tale of Szeth.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's most applicable to Szeth, and we're supposed to see it as a connection to Szeth because of his bound nature to the Oathstone, and like, I'm the assassin in white because other people are telling me to. But in reality, he has a choice. You always have a choice. And I think when you apply it to the Knights Radiant, it's the same kind of thing of, why are we fighting? Why are we doing this? Because there's a pressure, we're doing it because we're defending humanity. Well, until you realize that humanity is the attackers and the aggressors, and you're not really defending humanity, you're going after the native people of Rashar.
I think there's an element in this story too about taking responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think that Caledon and Szeth, in a way, fall on like opposite sides of that spectrum, where Szeth is very happy, we see through all 3 books of the Stormlight Archive, to continue to give up his responsibility and to continue to
put faith in other things.
Yeah. And Caledon does struggle with that, with just, giving up on everything and taking no responsibility at all. But Caledon is a man of extremes. And so when he decides to take responsibility, he almost goes too far and takes responsibility for things that he doesn't need to, and shoulders too much importance and too much responsibility that, he needs to find a little bit of equanimity and balance on that spectrum.
Excellent use of the word equanimity as well. I think we're going to hear a lot more about Wandersail, as you mentioned last week, a planned short kind of expanded interlude, similar to Edge Dancer.
Yes.
Is going to be released starring Risen.
Yes.
Called Wandersail.
Yes. I don't know what the connection will be to this specific proverb, let's say.
Yes, exactly.
I believe the ship that she is on is named the Wandersail, I believe. Again, don't know how these 2 stories are going to connect, but there will be a novella starring Risen called Wandersail.
So are we expecting that in this first set of 5, like after book 4, there would be Wandersail and then there would be book 5?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay. Obviously, these things are subject to change, but that's the best info we have right now. Tell me more about the things that you loved.
Okay. Well, to sort of continue on the conversation we were just having about Knights Radiant and responsibility, I want to turn us to Dalinar's vision of Nohodon and his conversation that he has with this ancient king, because there are a few super interesting quotes in this section that, again, similar to what I was saying last episode, there are so many things that now that I have more of a grasp on the story and just more books in this series, I have such a different perspective and ability to grasp so many different things here. So, quote, "The responsibility of what we've been given needs to make us better," end quote. And then later, Nohodon says, quote, "Perhaps the rest of you are right. Perhaps our abilities are proof of a divine election. But if this is true, should we not be more wary of how we act?" End quote. And this really stuck out to me because it seems like Nohodon is questioning the goodness of surge binding. I think this is before the orders of Radiance have been established. So there are just men with surge binding powers. There aren't really any like rules or structure on how they're using those powers. And there seems to be an idea at this time that these people are divinely chosen, that they are gods on earth, which makes sense. But I think it's interesting that Nohodon is kind of questioning that and saying, if these really were divine powers, wouldn't we be using them in like a better way? Kind
of the way that Dalinar will later question why there are only shard blades and shard plate and not shard tools and things to make society better.
Yeah, like why are these only being used for destruction? Why are these powers not making humans better? And if they are supposed to be used in a divine service, shouldn't we be more conscious of the way that we're using them? So anyway, I just thought that was super interesting. And I don't know how I would feel about this, but I wouldn't be surprised if a big twist in this series is that the Knights Radiant or / just Surge Binders are bad.
Yeah, I think that there's always the potential. I mean, we have to like be ready for that idea with Brandon, is that just like he could pull out the rug from us. We've kind of talked about this before, about how because of Szeth's oath that he swears to Dalinar at the end, and because of Caledon's insistence on doing what he believes is right because of Honorspren, I think that there is the potential setup where we see something like Caledon becoming quote-unquote the villain or antagonist to Dalinar and Szeth, as like you can imagine that if, for example, as you just predicted, like they have a sudden realization that the surges are actually bad, Szeth might say, well, you know, Dalinar, the bondsmith, has asked me to do this, so I will. And Caledon might say, I'll never use surge binding again. Like he could just go like fall back to his idea of just like, I'm a bridgeman, I'm a soldier, I'm a surgeon, and
maybe
like give it up. I could just see him making a different decision than the other surge binders because of his little like, you know,
although in a way, okay, and this is interesting because historically the Windrunners and the Skybreakers don't get along, because Skybreakers are all about the letter of the law and Windrunners are all about like what I feel is the right thing to do regardless of what the law says. So you could also see how Szeth might be better off in this circumstance because he is a person who thrives on structure. So if he, you know, if Dalinar said, hey, this is evil, don't do it, he wouldn't do it. Whereas Caledon, having the sort of room to interpret whatever he feels like is right, you know, what we feel is right is not always actually the right thing. So you could see Caledon, again, like you said, becoming more of the villain.
Mad speculation. Who knows what will happen? I think what we should do is actually jump over to another one of my favorite moments because it goes perfectly in line with the Radiance.
Do it.
My boy Teft. Teft, we know, is going to become the first of the...
The first of the sun?
The first of the Caledon sun. Yes, he's going to become the first little baby Windrunner under Caledon to become in his own right a Windrunner. And that's a huge journey that he goes on, and we see it happen over 3 books. It is so beautiful to me that it is Teft who explains the ideals of the Knights Radiant to Caledon.
Especially, I know we get really caught up on Teft's dramatic story in Oathbringer, but I was struck during this reread of the drama of his story.
No.
In the Way of Kings, and just like his past with his family and his community, and then now him being the one to, you know, be sort of the first announcer, the first witness to the Knights Radiant, really just like tugs at my heartstrings.
It's, again, all there. Like, there is so much already given to us about where Teft has been and where Teft is going. And when you start to see it all happen on the bigger scale, it really is quite wonderful. Just like, wow, this is what you can do when you are dedicating so much time and giving the space to all these different side characters. Is like you can take them on a journey over 3 books. Like, Teft is not a main character. He's a second to the Caledon story.
But adding his heartfelt story,
his voice, his experiences,
I think really helps the reader understand like the gravity and the importance and the drama of Caledon discovering his powers too. You know, where like without Teft's story in there, if we were, you know, cutting for time or whatever, you'd be like, oh, cool, now you have powers. But including that, you know, in the director's cut with Teft's story in there, it just makes it, you feel like the weight of history and the weight of responsibility behind the rebirth of these powers, and like the hope that they can provide to the whole society, not just like, hey man, now you got cool stuff.
So let's do it. Let's explain the first ideal.
Okay.
Quote, life before death.
Teft said, wagging a finger at Caledon.
The Radiant seeks to defend life always. He never kills unnecessarily and never risks his own life for frivolous reasons. Living is harder than dying. The Radiant's duty is to live.
Strength before weakness. All men are weak at some time in their lives. The Radiant protects those who are weak and uses his strength for others. Strength does not make one capable of rule. It makes one capable of service. Teft picked up spheres, putting them in his pouch. He held the last one for a second, then tucked it away too.
Journey before destination. There are always several ways to achieve a goal. Failure is preferable to winning through unjust means. Protecting 10 innocents is not worth killing one. In the end, all men die. How you lived will be far more important to the Almighty than what you accomplished. End quote.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it, folks.
That's it.
Like, you don't need much else. And that...
There's no commentary that we can offer on brilliance.
It's all summed up there. I felt like we should read it because we should read it, you know?
Yeah.
Now it's out there.
Yep.
As we go through and as you are rereading, keep an eye on those side characters who you think is a side character, like Teft, because the potential that they're going to have a huge payoff down the road is pretty dang high. That's the story that we're in. That's the world that we're in. It's like when you hear about someone, focus, even if it's not the Caledon or the Dalinar or the Shallan or whoever you're really...
I mean, or just read the book a bunch of times like we have. You don't have to get it all the first time.
If you want to be us, then you can. It's not hard.
Or just listen to the pod and we'll tell you all the little things.
Back over to you for another favorite thing.
I'm going to lighten it up. I just have a couple of smaller things to throw out now, starting with just a little tidbit that is dropped. Dalinar's devotery, the church essentially that he is a part of within Vorinism, is called the Order of Talenolot, which is just so perfect. He ostensibly is within the Order of Talenolot because he is a soldier, and Talenolot is the herald of war, herald of warfare, soldiers, etc. But the comparison between these two characters, I feel like, is just so deep and profound because Talenolot, as we know, is the last of the heralds in hell, basically, being tortured, trying to save the world, the one man standing between humanity and destruction. And Dalinar is serving that function on Rashar, on Earth, in quotes. And so I just thought the connection and the parallel between those two characters was so fantastic and grave.
That's a great comparison that I maybe was like picked up subconsciously by me, but for the most part I didn't make that connection, so that's great. Thank you for pointing that out. Let's do the one that makes up the crux of the Way of Kings. Really the peak of the story comes when Caledon and the bridge crew choose to save Dalinar and Adolin and the remaining men who are out on the tower.
Oh my gosh.
After
that whole scene is Sadeas's betrayal and the description of Dalinar's army just fighting all alone. It just breaks your heart.
It's
and then
so
Caledon
sad.
And the bridgemen risking everything.
The whole thing is such a masterwork, from the fact that you have a scene where it jumps into Dalinar and Adolin fighting like back to back, and Adolin is criticizing him. He's like, I told you this was going to happen. He was going to betray us. And Dalinar's just like, I know. Meanwhile, they're killing, dozens or hundreds of Parshendi that are charging in, but like they know what's in store.
And Dalinar's two regrets that he feels in that moment, like being certain that he is going to die, being okay with it because he followed his honor and followed his heart and what he believed to be right. Yeah, exactly. And that his only two regrets are, one, for poor Renarin back at camp, and he just feels like he's failed his youngest son, who needs a little bit more help, who struggles a little bit more, that he's leaving him all alone to do a job that he's not prepared for. And then two, that he has wasted so much time not being with Navani. And I just love that moment of clarity that if we are blessed, we receive those moments in life where things that are truly important suddenly become clear. And if we're fortunate, like Dalinar is, we are able to move forward in life and to enact those things and become better.
Yeah, to improve because of those moments of clarity, because it could have gone a different way. I mean, this was a legitimate moment of fear of just like, oh, are they gonna have this character who we have followed and like been led to believe, oh, Dalinar's the leader, Dalinar's like the one who is most important in Alethkar, and then kill him in the first book, at the end of the first book. Oh, it was definitely a fear that I had. So it was real. And like the sadness, the connection, the realization that Dalinar's having, all of it is just so palpable. And it creates that emotion in the reader when it's not just told from one person's perspective. It's not just Caledon's own experiences, which would be enough, in most books, like that would be fine. That's a pretty cool story.
Totally.
But the fact that you're jumping over to see what else is going on, and that these two characters in Dalinar and Adolin and all their men, they're in real serious peril and they're going to die and they are prepared to die. And bridge crews see that, they know that, they make the decision in what is, like, to me, just like, again, this is it. This is all that you need to know. When someone is in need, when people are in need, Caledon doesn't want to go. He is not by any means bound to go. Like, this is a slave. This is a person who's been mistreated and given a chance at freedom, is just walk away. Walk away with your cool bridge and your friends. And like,
yeah, everything that he has wanted for the last
laid out
months
in front of him, and just like, it's there. Your freedom, take it. That's what you deserve.
Yeah.
You deserve freedom.
And his freedom would come at the cost of thousands of men dying.
Yeah, and they sit with that decision, and Caledon is flashing back to his father, Lirin, and the way that Lirin raised him to be a surgeon, and the messages that he passed on that have stayed with Caledon and driven Caledon, been an inspiration. Those are the words that he hears in this moment of trial. Would you read this quote?
Quote, "Somebody has to start, son. Somebody has to step forward and do what is right because it is right. If nobody starts, then others cannot follow." End quote.
If nobody starts, then others cannot follow. There are other Radiants, including Yasna, including Shallan, including Dalinar, but Caledon is the one that has to start this walk down to his death with his crew, his bridgemen. They're all planning to die as they move forward to try to do the right thing.
Yeah, I think that's even the best example, apart from the other Radiants, that Caledon starts by just saying, I'm going to stay.
Yeah.
I'm going to stay and see if Dalinar needs help, but you guys go on ahead. And because of his example, because he provides the example of doing the thing that is right, even though it is difficult, the rest of his bridge crew completely gets on board and is like, okay, yeah, we're in it. We're in it for the honor. We're in it because it's right. And they lose people. They lose their friends doing what's right, but they do it anyway because Caledon stood up first.
And it is in this moment when we see Syl in her full glory. She is no longer a windspren, zipping around. She stands as a full grown person, equal to Caledon, and far more quote unquote human, or far more of a person than we've ever seen her before. And she has this to say in this moment, quote,
"Perhaps not. You see, I've remembered what kind of spren I am."
"Is this the time for it, Syl?"
"I bind things, Caledon,"
she said, turning and meeting his eyes.
"I am honor spren, spirit of oaths, of promises, and of nobility." End quote.
So we get the full realization of one of our characters in Syl, and we get Caledon choosing to do the right thing even though he knows it will mean death for all of them. I mean, that's his assumption at that moment. And I think that is really just, Brandon's been teeing us up this entire time, just like building a whole backstory so he could tell this one moment of like what he would do, and what he wants this character to do in this moment.
Yeah, and not only is he, it would be enough for him to give up everything that he's wanted to do the right thing. That would be enough. But in addition, you add the layer of two groups who hate each other, the light and the dark, the light eyes and the dark eyes. And he chooses to be kind. He chooses to do the right thing for the group of people who have oppressed him and like have done everything bad to him. So I think adding that additional layer brings even more poignancy to it, that not only is he going to do the right thing for the people that he loves and cares about and respects, but he'll do the right thing, like that quote said, because it is right. I have one more just like side note tidbit to share about this section of the book.
Okay.
That relates to other things that we have said on this podcast as well. Caledon, during this section, inhales some stormlight, and he notices that he can feel, quote, a rhythm to the battle, almost like the beat of the Parshendi song, end quote.
I stopped on that line and was just like, oh, it's all here.
So stormlight is like allowing them to tune in to like the fundamental rhythms of Roshar that create all of everything on Roshar.
Yeah, I don't.
Our speculation, but
it is speculation. However, there's a lot of arrows pointing us in this direction.
So many.
What I came back on is that the thing that Hoyd put great value in, at least on Roshar, I don't know if this is everywhere, but at least on Roshar, was the flute. And he gave Caledon that flute. Caledon eventually loses it. We'll talk about that another time. But he gave Caledon that flute. And in my mind, that's the big hint, is that like on Roshar, maybe other places, but on Roshar, music and rhythm create something like matter as a possibility.
Whoa.
Like I am not opposed to the idea. This is just craziness, but I'm not opposed to the idea that like Honor and Cultivation sang a song and it became Roshar.
That would be so cool. Although we know that Roshar existed before.
The planet existed, but like I'm saying
maybe that's how the Parshendi were created.
Yeah, exactly. So like the life on Roshar was, my theory, would be birthed through song and rhythm and music. And that's why you have things like the Rashadium that draw
music spren,
because they are like the most pure manifestation of the music that was used to like of creation, the music of creation.
Ah, so beautiful.
I don't know if it's going to work out that way, but we can all play. Tell me about your last favorite moment.
I am going to go back to the epigraphs.
Of course. Back where it all began.
Yeah. And the epigraphs in part 4 are once again death rattles. A few interesting ones here that I just wanted to pull out from chapter 53. Quote, "He must pick it up, the fallen title, the tower, the crown, and the spear." End quote. That jumped out to me because Dalinar's like sigil sort of thing, his name, Colin, is rendered in glyphs that are the shape of a tower and a crown. And
he wears a crown while fighting on the tower and is saved by a spear.
Yeah, I was going to say, and then obviously Caledon is the spear. So I don't know. I think there's something there. I don't have anything super insightful. I just wanted to put it out there.
Yeah, I mean, I love that we see the actual like drawings, so often at the beginning of the chapters, and we forget that like that's part of the world too.
Yeah.
Like those symbols are
Oh my gosh.
all in world and stuff. So great catch there. Love it. What else do we got from the death rattles?
Chapter 54. This one was really interesting. Quote, "The burdens of 9 become mine. Why must I carry the madness of them all? O Almighty, release me." End quote. I thought this was interesting because it's almost like the person who is dying is like somehow channeling Tom.
And maybe this is complete speculation. However, he says that the burdens of 9 become mine. We understand that as like he's holding back everything that they used to also share the burden with. But the question of why must I carry the madness of them all? He's not. They are all going mad.
Uh-huh.
So here's some speculation. What if this was a prayer, a ask of God, even if Honor was dead? I don't know if Honor was dead at this point when it was asked, because, time is not exactly linear in the death rattles. But what if this was an ask of like, hey, all of this is happening to me, and these people, the heralds, are out on Roshar being normal.
Oh,
and like maybe
before they started going mad?
Exactly. Like maybe all the torture was happening to him, and
he's kind of siphoning it off.
Yes, exactly.
To them now.
He makes an ask of either honor or cultivation, and they grant, and they're like, okay, like that madness then travels into the heralds.
Yeah.
And that's why we see them in their broken state.
Interesting thought.
Keeping it crazy with the death rattles. What else we got?
Okay, this next one, I don't have anything important to say about it. I just like it. It's from chapter 55. Quote, "A woman sits and scratches out her own eyes. Daughter of kings and winds, the vandal." End quote. Obviously describing Shalash as the daughter of Yezrian. And I just love the imagery and the poetry of that line.
Yeah, I mean, it's as poetic as it gets. Tell us about the last one.
Okay, lastly, chapter 69, quote, "All is withdrawn from me. I stand against the one who saved my life. I protect the one who killed my promises. I raise my hand. The storm responds." End quote. I have no idea what this means, but I just thought it was so interesting. I am like wondering if it has some sort of bearing on the theory we spoke about just a bit ago, that the Knights Radiant might somehow turn out to be bad in some way. I don't know.
I at least have it feels to me a little Caledon-y.
It does, yeah.
And so maybe a flash of a previous Windrunner who would have been, dealing with some of the same things that Caledon did, kind of like a mirrored story. So like,
but also like maybe the Parshendi, since they have storm form and they can like do more of the controlling of the storm. Mm-hmm. We haven't really seen Caledon do any kind of storm control, Yeah,
I guess I could see it more as like he draws in the storm, and that is the feeling of the storm responding.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, just another way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the death rattles have a lot. I think there's some mention, I don't want to say this with too much authority, but I do believe that there's a mention online that like death rattles will be seen again. That we'll get more
I'm sure.
death rattle epigraphs as a potential, either in Rhythm of War or maybe the final one.
Can I just add like a bonus note?
Bonus notes are always allowed.
Good. In the epilogue, we can just briefly mention the epilogue, which is told from Hoyd's point of view, awaiting the return of Telenalot. And he has a quick note about how he's seen many different societies and they all have sort of different ways of establishing hierarchies, and some are weirder than others. And the system here on Roshar of delineating between light eyes and dark eyes he says that there is a good reason why this particular structure is in place, which I am just fascinated by. I need to know.
Well, okay, so I saw this, I bumped on this, I definitely took note, and my first thought was the light eyes are descendants, genetically, of the early Radiants.
But I think this ties in to something else. There is one of the reasons that Dalinar is like criticized or ridiculed for listening to The Way of Kings is because one of the sort of blasphemous ideas presented in that book and world is that dark eyes are above light eyes. There's a reversal in that book of their current world order, which is why people don't like it, because it threatens their world order. So I'm wondering if it has more to do with that like at some point dark eyes were better than light eyes and then something happened.
Well, that also sounds very much like the Parshendi and the human as well, like the same dynamic.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
You could kind of see, okay, this is just way too deep and way too meta, but you could see the idea of like a minority in the light eyes go seeking a great power, perhaps from odium, not from honor, get access to the surges, and then use those to supplicate, to take control away from the dark eyes and reverse their position in society. Then all of the modern light eyes, to keep my theory in place, would be descendants of those people.
Yeah, I think there is something about the Radiance in there because their eyes, everyone's eyes turn light when they surge bind.
Yes, and we know that in the ancient days, the Radiants were very diverse in terms of where they came from across Rashar. So they weren't just like one group of people, and there are light eyes in other parts of Rashar. Notably, in some of those places, light eyes are not rulers or held up by any high standards. So the fact that Hoyd calls it out and says that like this particular dynamic is a good one, or
it just has a good reason.
Yeah, exactly. I think is super interesting and definitely points to some type of interesting thing going on in Rasharian past.
Okay. Full steam ahead. Words of Radiance. Incoming.
Once you have Way of Kings under your belt, there really is no reason to stop.
Oh, I can't stop.
Yeah.
I am a runaway train.
Without flashing back to early 2000 bands, we will instead press on, press forward, keep the reread going. Hit us up on Facebook, Reddit, Twitter. We're everywhere.
Ooh, I do want to just highlight for a moment, if you are on our Facebook page, our Facebook group, there is a great post up right now by one of the listeners asking for people's favorite Cosmere memes. And I don't know about you, but I can really use a laugh these days. So join us on the Facebook page, show us your favorite Cosmere meme, and let's spread a little joy and happiness.
If you would like to, I feel now is also a good time to say that our next few episodes going forward will include asks for you to rate us on your various iTunes or other type of services that you get.
Wherever you listen, rate us, review us. That helps other Cosmere fans out there find their community.
We try not to do it very often and just kind of keep it as a summer thing. Well, summer's here enough, folks. And so we are asking for ratings. It is stupid how many new listeners we get based on like one or two new ratings or reviews. I have access to the numbers and can definitely see that like every rating, every review legitimately creates more listeners. It's baffling. I don't understand the
Black
algorithms.
magic.
Yeah,
There's
something going on, but like I promise, if you ever felt like, well, it doesn't really matter what I do,
your surge binding power is rating and reviewing our podcast.
Thank you so much for being on this journey with us. It's been a great review of Way of Kings. We look forward to talking about Words of Radiance. Hope you guys are all doing great in this time. Brooke, can you take us away?
Until next time, life before death,
strength before weakness,
journey before destination.